Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. We've got trees in trees, and you know what that means. It's time for the Wood Elves, and not just the Wood Elves, but a Tree Man build. This time we're going up against the Empire, straight into the fire and flames. Nonetheless, because my opponent did bring Volkmar the Grim and a let's see, a Bright Wizard here, so does have plenty of fire damage to go around. Let's see how we can do. Of course, the Ancient Tree Man going to be leading the way for my forces. In terms of his spell loadout, he's got Awakening of the Wood, Earthblood, and Dwellers Below, so a bit of damage potential and some healing, of course. We've also got Life Plume and this Blessing of the Ancients, very essential. When he stands in the forest, he gets extra Winds of Magic recharge. Just the Ancient Tree Man in general has decent combat stats, not amazing, but certainly with that Call of the Woods gives him a bit of extra melee attack. He does also have Expert Charge Defense, so both large and infantry-sized units charging him will not get their charge bonus, at least from the front. He also causes Fear and Terror, of course, and because of the Firebark Elders here, he does have the weakness to fire that is countered by the 25% fire resistance. So that's the main reason, of course, why you bring these Firebark Elders, who themselves have very good melee defense, heavy armor, do flaming magic damage, immune to psychology as well, and of course that wildfire aura, giving them area of effect. Fire resistance very much helps tree units not just get burned down, which is going to be important, especially against the Empire, which can bring a lot of fire damage. Of course, we've also got a Tree Man, another unit of Treekin, front line of Eternal Guards with shields, including the Winterheart Guard. We've also got the Wardens of Kithrel, Loex Tricksters, and one single unit of Glade Guard with Hagbane tips, as well as a single Sisters of Thorn. For my opponent's force here, of course, the aforementioned Volkmar, Bright Wizard. We've also got some Great Swords and Halberdiers, front line of Spearmen with shields. Definitely want those shields. A single unit of Handgunners and a couple of Crossbowmen. This is the one matchup where I think Crossbowmen are actually decently solid. And he's also got a couple of Empire Knights as well as a Mortar. So a nice wide Empire army, which is definitely a good strategy against the Wood Elves. Volkmar himself is also a decent pick against the Wood Elves. He is a little bit vulnerable to getting sniped, but he does have good missile resistance and magic resistance, as well as having that regeneration and the ability to give himself even more damage resistance as well. He's also got Banishment, Grand Soulfire, and the Grand Hammer of Sigmar. For the Bright Wizard, looks like he's got Fireball and Burning Head, with, of course, the Kindle Flame. So you can see the battle's already getting underway as I'm just kind of probing my opponent here. Just trying to feel out his weaknesses and more or less see if we can force a favorable engagement here. I do eventually realize, though, that my opponent is more or less content to just sit here with his artillery, and I'm going to be forced to approach, which is perfectly fine by me. We can mostly use this forest here to screen our approach so that the mortar won't be able to get line of sight, ideally, on some of these units here. You can see, though, unfortunately, some of them do break line of sight. These Winterheart Guards in particular are going to be a nice high-value target for that mortar to shoot at, and it's going to open up shots shortly. Meanwhile, the Sisters of Thorn here coming up, doing some nice skirmishing. They do have actually pretty solid armor-piercing missile damage here at 10 missile damage per shot, which is not bad at all. You can see they're doing some solid damage to those Empire Knights there, despite their 110 armor. One of the big reasons I like Sisters of Thorn, they're just an excellent kind of hybrid skirmish unit. You can see we are going to bait these Empire Knights away here, and this is exactly what I want, is to try and draw them away from this main formation here, see if we can take them out in a more isolated situation. But we'll see. Mortar's opening up shots, so let's watch as these cannonballs come screaming in, and looks like a couple of solid hits there on those Eternal Guard, which definitely will do some damage. The Loex Tricksters, thankfully, because of their loose formation, won't take as much damage from the mortars, but the Eternal Guards definitely, with their a little bit denser formation, will take some damage there. You can see the trees moving up through the trees, and Sisters of Thorn once again coming forward to try and draw out the Empire Knights. Unfortunately, we didn't get them quite close enough to my infantry to really support, but this time we're going to actually draw in both units of Empire Knights, which is perfect. I'm going to go ahead and use the poison missiles. Looks like they actually fired at those great swords mistakenly instead, but eventually they do apply the poison here. We're also going to drop the Curse of Anraher, which is going to decrease their speed, as well as dropping an Awakening of the Wood here. You can see my opponent did miss that burning head a little bit there, but just I want to quickly note here, these Empire Knights are down to only 7 speed, so you can see the War Dancers in the Eternal Guard rush in, and they are easily going to catch and drag down a lot of these Empire Knights, especially with the Sisters of Thorn supporting as well. You can see once those speed debuffs wear off, they can definitely move out, but we have been able to drag down quite a few unit models of each, and the Sisters of Thorn there perpetually, you know, dragging the unit models back, and at this point they're going to have a hard time getting away. You can see them desperately trying to path through with all these anti-large AP units in this section. It's going to be really rough. Meanwhile, in the back line, that Banishment was also a bit of a miss there, so 2 area of effect spells by my opponent, kind of swing and a miss there twice, so a little bit rough in terms of that aspect, but you can see my opponent is forming up his missile line quite nicely to start firing in at the trees. Of course, the crossbows won't do a whole lot, but those handgunners especially are going to be nasty, so I drop an Awakening of the Wood on them, not only to do some damage, but also to disrupt their formation, and the Hagbane tips are unloading on them. Volkmar, though, not too happy about this, going to come through with his Pimp Cart and try and shut them down. You know, I thought that he was going to try and shut them down. It looks like he's actually going after those Eternal Guard instead, but more Empire Knights trying to come around, and this Burning Head is going to make solid contact with this part of the line. Thankfully, the Firebark Elders were able to mitigate some of that damage. You can see the Wildfire Aura is affecting both the Winterheart Guards and the Wardens of Kithral, who are supporting here. Meanwhile, the other Empire Knights trying to respond. This flanking force with the War Dancers and the Eternal Guard had broken through, and it was pretty much about to compromise all these missile units. So my opponent very wisely pulling in these Empire Knights to screen. Unfortunately, they're not going to last long in this combat. But that being said, the Ancient Treeman is starting to take some damage, but you can see Halberdiers, despite their armor-piercing anti-large, I mean, they're light armor, and they're also being stood on by, you know, several large units at the same time, which makes it really hard to get attack animations in, not to mention the friendly fire from the mortar can't be helping their leadership. Granted, that mortar is doing solid damage to the Wood Elves as well, but looks like another Awakening of the Wood there. Make sure to keep those Empire Knights bogged down so that the spears can finish dragging them down, and then the Sisters of Thorn starting to push through and tie up these missile units so that they can't continue to fire here. You can see the Bright Wizard also kind of involved in this combat here. Pretty bad situation for him overall, but the guns do turn and fire. Granted, the Sisters of Thorn do have some physical resistance to be able to mitigate some of that damage, but they are still going to take some heat there, and looks like a fireball unloading. Fortunately, straight into this pocket where everyone's got fire resistance, so it's actually not going to do that much damage to the Ancient Treeman there. You can see the infantry line for the Empire starting to suffer here. Even the Great Swords, despite their you know, heavier armor and anti-infantry and everything, just getting dragged down here by the trees, and several elite units of Wood Elves as well, but magic being unleashed, Awakening of the Wood on the opposite side, and here comes a solid banishment from my opponent. It is going to get a good chunk of those Winterheart Guards and the Wardens as well. But the Warden's actually relatively healthy here, and at this point I realize, you know, we're starting to run out of unit models. I need to try and finish off my opponent's leadership if possible. Volkmar is just continuing to go after these Hagbane tips, who surprisingly are able to hold their leadership together, but you can see he's fleeing desperately from the Treeman. Ancient Treeman's coming over, and once Volkmar gets surrounded and bogged down by these high mass units, it's pretty much going to be game over for him. You can see, though, that there are still some Empire infantry supporting in this pocket here. I'm trying to just force path everything after Volkmar. You can see these Treemen, though, and the infantry that we're supporting as well. The Wardens of Kithral, especially with their armor sundering, need to get over here, but unfortunately they're getting caught up on those Empire State troops. That being said, Sisters of Thorn helping to tie up the back line here. You can see them, they did remove that mortar crew from the artillery piece at least, and going to be charging with a nice downhill charge into these crossbowmen. The Glade Guards also surprisingly still online here, also going to be firing in, doing some missile support here, so it's very good stuff. At this point, things are starting to turn in favor of the Wood Elves as Volkmar starts to take more and more damage here. You can see the Winterheart Guards are starting to get in here, and Volkmar is not going to be able to get out of this situation. Yeah, he's just going to get dragged down by angry trees at this point. But the Empire Infantry here supporting, again, the Halberdiers, just not quite able to do enough just because there's so many unit models here. Not to mention that Tree can just generally have pretty good melee defense, so it's tough to make good hits on them, especially with a lower melee attack unit like Halberdiers. Looks like another fireball just went off there. But I do just want to make a note here. Halberdiers don't have the best melee attack stats. Not sure if I can grab one of their unit models here so that we can have a look. Yeah, only 26 melee attack, with the bonus versus large of 16, putting them, what, right around 37 or so. Math, maybe a bit more, but still not quite good enough to make solid contact. with a lot of these tree units because of their good melee defense. You can see Volkmar is getting very, very low at this point, so we're getting close to being able to force a leadership victory here. A lot of the Empire force is having a hard time holding their leadership together. Thankfully, my opponent was able to finish off this flanking force, the Loex Tricksters finally getting dragged down, and that has mostly secured this missile pocket here. But the main line is completely crumbled, and Volkmar is about to go down here. You can see just, you know, fire and brimstone all around, and man, that's a cool shot. Volkmar trying to fight the trees. He actually smacked down one of those Winterheart guards there. But yeah, he's not too long for this world. Once he goes down, yep, and there he is. With that, a lot of the Empire forces are going to start to lose their leadership. You can see that severely tip the balance of power. I'm basically just going to get this giant tree Death Star and start walking towards the missile units. Let's see, I think they have fast enough speed that they can actually catch them. What, 34 to 33? I'm not sure 100% that they would. But just even getting close to these guys is going to affect their leadership severely, and with the Bright Wizard especially starting to take damage, that's going to affect the balance of power even more. And oh man, just look at that angry tree horde just pushing up through the hill, you know, in an inexorable force, just not giving a crap about all the guns and the crossbows and everything. Man, what an epic sight, and it is going to be victory for the Wood Elves, so super fun battle. Well played to my opponent. Hope you guys enjoyed watching that one. It was an awesome, awesome cinematic experience for sure. And Winterheart Guards, definitely the MVPs here in protecting all those tree units against the fire damage. They were all able to hold until the late game there. Even the Ancient Tree Man, who was eating the majority of those handgunners' bullets right to the face. Just with the missile resistance, you know, and the physical resistance, healing and everything, and of course the fire resistance from the Firebark Elders helping to mitigate the fireballs and fireballs and everything. Yeah, ended up turning out pretty well. I think this build is still a little bit vulnerable to getting surrounded, but the Treekin units with the healing and their good melee defense are very, very sustainable, and you can honestly outlast a lot of different armies. What my opponent had here is honestly a pretty good anti-Wood Elf army, or I should say anti-traditional Wood Elf army, but the Treekin Death Star, particularly with the Firebark Elders protecting everyone from fire damage, can be pretty hard to deal with, even if you do have some armor piercing. Like these halberdiers and the great swords just were not enough at the end of the day, and the handgunners definitely did some damage, especially to the Ancient Tree Man, but again, not enough at the end of the day. You can see the Eternal Guards with shields doing relatively well across the board, but especially these two elite Regiment of Renowned Spearmen, the Wardens of Kithrel and the Loex Tricksters. Big fans of both of these guys. If you use them appropriately, they're incredibly powerful units. 153 kills on those Wardens of Kithrel and 96 on the Loex Tricksters. The Loex Tricksters especially, a lot of those coming against Empire Knights. These guys and then the one unit of Eternal Guard that was supporting them were able to drag down the majority of my opponent's Empire Knights, which kind of gave me the mobility advantage, despite the fact that I really only had one unit of Cavalry. But yeah, Firebark Elders are also racking up 58 kills. The Tree Man actually didn't do too much, but the extra terror and just, you know, presence there in the front line was definitely helpful. So for my opponent, 93 kills on Volkmar, not bad at all. Definitely like him in this matchup, although he's a little bit vulnerable to getting gooned by just overwhelming Way Watchers. He's pretty decent. Personally, I'm a bigger fan of the Archlector, as you guys know, just because he's cheaper. But still, not a bad pick at all. The main picks that I would question for my opponent would be these three guys right here, these non-shielded infantry. Really think that you'd get better value from cutting these halberdiers and the two greatswords, just bringing some swordsmen, and maybe a couple more spearmen with shields. Basically, you just want all your infantry to be cheap and have shields, because that means they'll trade much better against the Wood Elf infantry. That may even give you some leftover funds to try and chevron them up a bit. State Troop swordsmen especially will trade very cost effectively with Wood Elf infantry with some chevrons. That being said, when they're being stood on top of by a bunch of trees, very angry trees at that, it's going to potentially be a tough time. But, you know, maybe you want to dump the chevrons into the spearmen instead. But the halberdiers, just for their cost, I really don't think that the armor piercing ends up being worth it, as you guys saw here, especially for the extra risk that they are against missile attacks. Great swords, kind of the same thing. You don't really need the armor piercing anti-infantry, especially because there's no armored infantry for the Wood Elves. So I would just say that swordsmen are probably a more cost-effective pick here. Other than that, my opponent's army is super solid. You know, I really like the mortar here. Can be a bit of a risky pick, but definitely can do some good damage as well. crossbowman not bad and an ace handgunner to deal with trees is definitely the right idea. Unfortunately, there were just way more trees than one unit of handgunners could deal with, and it ended up being too much for the Empire. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching that one. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.